Hey, this is The Intersection where faith, life, and culture meet. I'm Pastor Eric Targe, and I'm excited here. Joining me is Justin, the Wrestler May.
I hate that.
Do you hate that? I'm doing it anyway. It's
that.
Justin, the Wrestler May.
I'm not that coordinated.
You're not that coordinated, but you love wrestling. I just feel like it's a good one. And I don't feel like I know our other person well enough to have like a little tagline.
No, that's fine. But I'm just saying, I do love wrestling, and you love like Puerto Rican desserts. So, but I don't.
You can call me the Flan Targe. I don't
say Eric, the horrible dessert Targe.
Whoa!
I just say this is my friend.
Listen, you could call
Targe.
me Eric the Flan Targe, Eric the Guyava Targe. I'll take it all. And joining us also is Claire Vanderhart. Claire, how's it going?
It's going well. It's exciting to be here with you guys.
Oh, fun and all the back and forth.
I say that now.
We'll see if that continues on throughout the rest of this season.
Yes, we will.
Okay, guys. So something that I think both of you know about me, something that I love. I'm a big fan of Harry Potter.
Right.
So I love the Harry Potter books. I think the gospel is absolutely clear in them. We can talk about that in a bit. But here's where I'm geeking out today. Okay. Get this. This is news. It was posted in the New York Post just this week. We are on the verge of major movements in history. There is now a real life invisibility cloak.
Whoa.
A real life invisibility cloak has been created. If you know Harry Potter, then you know there's an invisibility cloak. It's been created by a company named Vollebach, which sounds a little too close to Voldemort. For me, for those of you who know Harry Potter, then
Let's presume they all do, except for the ones that don't.
So yeah, it's an invisibility cloak. So far, they're predicting that in 3 years, it's going to be on the markets. Thus far, they've just figured out the infrared kind of thing of your body warmth and how to hide that, from cameras. And so yeah, you can check it out there. Maybe I'll put a picture up on the screen for others to see. But yeah,
this is not going to work.
Why is it not going to work?
No, it's not going to work.
An invisibility cloak won't work?
It absolutely will not work. No way. No way possible.
Why?
I'm calling shenanigans. That's just clickbait.
No, it's real. It's an actual organization.
Lots of stuff
It's happening.
Is real.
They have a little computer plugged into it, which makes me think that it's real. But
let me tell you something. We would have had, if the technology to pull this off actually existed and would actually work, we would have had the invisible cars decades ago. Knight Rider. We just Knight Rider clearly set everybody up to want an invisible car, and we know how the tech could work. You have all those little cameras on the one side pointing the picture on the other, and you broadcast the thing.
Just quick. Tell me how you know invisible cars don't exist.
Oh, that's fair.
Have you ever seen one?
This has been The Intersection, where faith, life, and culture come to die.
So one of my literary dreams is coming to life, right? One of my literary dreams is coming to life. We've got invisibility cloaks coming. When it comes to literature, are you guys into sci-fi?
On occasion.
On occasion, what's your sci-fi?
I don't read sci-fi as much. I enjoy Star Wars like everyone. Okay. I enjoy some of the Star Trek, like many people, like my dad and
Did you read Star Wars or
no?
No, do you read sci-fi or not really?
No, I've tried. It's not my genre of choice.
What did you try?
I can't even remember at this point.
Oh,
it was back in my teen years.
Okay, and you're a sci-fi guy?
I mean, yeah, but similarly, I've read a bunch, but it's been a really long time. I don't really read that much fiction anymore. Okay. Busy kids.
Yeah.
Stuff. But
you do read fiction occasionally.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so what's the fiction you guys are reading now? I'm one of those people that always has 12 things on my Goodreads that I'm reading at a time, and it's awful. Yeah. But I do love fiction. What are you guys reading? I want to grow my Goodreads list.
Yeah, I really enjoy character sketches, so I love some of the old classics.
Okay, yeah.
By Austen and all of that.
Cool.
I love mystery genre as well because I love puzzles and it just is intriguing. So I love some of the classic mysteries. But I've also been
Sherlock
reading,
Holmes.
Yeah.
Or have you read Father Brown?
I have. Yes. So good.
Okay.
So yeah, love all of those. And then I've been reading some Louise Penny lately.
Okay.
So that's fun. I enjoyed The Silent Patient. Was one of the recent ones I read. That was really good.
So what's the most recent fiction you read?
I just finished a book by Louise Penny called I forget now.
Ah.
It was by her. It was good.
Okay.
I I can't remember.
Okay, and what was the point of it? Because it's not
Yes.
not Christian fiction there, just
No,
classic
it's
fiction.
not. Yes. So a lot of times I love reading books that are recommended to me by my friends. It's a great way to kind of connect with them. So this was recommended to me by a family member. But it's interesting because it gives you a great insight into other people's thinking and their interpretation of the world. And I love seeing the characters and their motives. One of the kind of underlying themes of this book ended up being conscience and how your conscience can haunt you. And so that was fascinating, especially coming from, I'm pretty sure it's a non-Christian writer. So it's interesting to see how the characters deal with that topic.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And a good reason to read.
Totally.
To be thinking, okay, how do I get into the mind of someone else,
Yes.
understand their perspective? What about you? What are you reading?
Well, see, I feel like y'all set me up to look real dumb.
Oh, that's okay.
So no. So okay, I did legitimately just finish rereading The Great Divorce like a week ago.
Yeah, C.S.
So
Lewis.
I mean, I've read it maybe 20 times. It's just
Yeah,
such
yeah.
every paragraph is great. But the last
Is
real,
that like fiction or is that allegory?
No, it's it's fiction.
I don't know. It feels.
I would qualify it as fiction, but it's obviously written by somebody who's trying to illustrate a lot of great, deep philosophical and theological truths. But prior to that, so my whole family, we went to Colorado, and we drive. We always drive because we have 4 kids, and it's really just worth it for me to be able to pull over, and like let them go to the bathroom on the side of the road and not have a child running up and down the aisles. I digress.
Yeah.
So
One
one
kids
of the
are
things
not welcome on airplanes.
they're kind of.
They show up, they're not welcome.
That's right. That's right. So one of the things that my wife and I started doing really early in our marriage, maybe even before we were married, is that we would start to read books, like audiobooks, but cheap person audiobooks where one person's actually reading them in the car. And so we've gravitated towards all manner of things. And this last trip, we reread Michael Crichton's Eaters of the Dead. Which, if you don't know, is
know
kind
nothing
of
about
awesome.
this.
Okay, so fun fact: it's like historical fiction. Okay, it is based on, and I'm going to get the century wrong. I want to say it's 12th century real historical figure, Ibn Fahlan, and he's got a really long name. He was a courtier in the Salah's whatever palace. He gets on the wrong side of this guy, and he gets sent as an ambassador into basically what's now Russia, and where we've got Vikings and we've got the peoples of Constantinople coming up, and he ends up getting, this is all true. We have this, this is a real thing, and the first third of the book is just the English translation of his story, where he ends up going and getting sort of kidnapped by these Vikings, and he's the reason we know about Vikings of that period, really.
Yeah.
Anyway, then the book takes a turn where they go and do this crazy Viking thing, and there's all these, I won't spoil anything, but sort of monstrous, are they people, are they not, coming in and kidnapping and eating people, and then you got this whole Viking raid to go take care of them, and it's awesome.
So, spiritual benefit. Any? Yes? No?
I mean, insofar as joy is a great spiritual benefit. Yeah, but like I said, Great Divorce.
Yeah.
That's very spiritual. I'm and most of what I'm reading is nonfiction.
Yeah.
I feel attacked a little bit. I feel like
No, you shouldn't feel attacked.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that we're trying to get on today's episode is that reading fiction and just reading fiction, it is a process of joy. It is a process of kind of expanding our imaginations, but it also can be deeply beneficial to how it is that we interact with the world. And so understanding someone else's conscience, just getting joy and finding places where you can relate to others. So recently I read through Frankenstein. So I tried to do a monster summer. And so I was reading through a whole bunch of classic monster books just for my own enjoyment. I took my college students, a bunch of them, through Jekyll and Hyde, which is a super short
I've never
book.
actually read that
It's
one.
so
Very
short.
good.
You could read it in maybe 2 hours, 2 or 3 hours. But I took them through that, and we talked about the theology that undergirds it. But the same thing with Frankenstein. Frankenstein's not written. Mary Shelley is the exact opposite of a Christian author. Her biography and everything around it, you just go, oh, wow, this is a woman who was truly seeking to undo what theism had done to the world, widespread theism. But it was just really interesting reading Frankenstein and seeing how her understanding of this creature was and the relationship with the master was her understanding of God, right? Like it was almost like this deistic approach of God abandoned us, he left us on his own, and now we, these monsters, have to make our way in the world, and we struggle with connection. And I loved the book because good fiction does that, right? Like good fiction makes us really think about maybe we're not seeing the world from every perspective. Maybe we're not seeing it for all it could be.
Absolutely. There's a quote in An Experiment in Criticism by C.S. Lewis, which is out of print, but it's an excellent book if you can get a hold of it. And he points out how when you're reading, you are maintaining your own identity. You're still yourself, but you're entering into the mind of somebody else. And so you really get to think like somebody else thinks while you're reading their work.
Right. That's, I found like a lot of historical fiction. I went through this phase where I was reading a lot of...
You like historical fiction?
I love historical fiction.
I can't stand historical fiction.
To get...
I know a lot of people love it. I can't. I'm like, I want to know if it's true or it's not.
Right. Well, like to get immersed in a different time and place and really helping you to see the people of that time and place as they were, as human beings who would probably not be distinguishable from you and I in 2022 were it not for a cultural separation. I find like those sorts of things have really made just understanding time periods and the decisions that people made and the things that maybe we as a culture look back on and say, how could those monsters do that, blah, 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 and to realize like, no, actually you would have done the same thing. Just that growing empathy with people in a different time, I think also can help us to better empathize with people in a different culture now, right? Because you're growing that understanding, getting yourself outside of that box of, well, this is the right time and everything around me and every culture around me and every person around me who's different is wrong.
Okay. So what's the next fiction book you plan to read?
I'm actually planning to read Dracula.
Oh, Bram Stoker.
Yes.
Oh, I love Dracula.
It's October, so.
Dracula is amazing.
And I started it last fall, and then it turned into Christmas, and I was like, I don't feel like I can finish it over Christmas, so I'm picking that back up.
Oh, I love Dracula. That's awesome. What about you? I'm sorry. If you want to comment on Dracula.
No. I was just going to say that's also one of my favorites. Like, I mean, I don't know. Can we recommend that on this show?
Oh, I mean, there's so many theological overtones and things that you can read under. Like, I mean, totally. Yeah.
I mean, it's a spooky one.
Okay, but what are you going to be reading?
I actually just started, and I may hate myself for it, and I may abandon it, rereading Dostoevsky's Brother Karamazov.
Oh, because I'm reading Crime and Punishment right now.
Oh, that's awesome.
But, yeah.
So like, I hadn't read it
also
since college.
For those who don't know.
Yeah. I hadn't read it since college, and I'm thinking, okay, I feel like I want to do it now, but I was like last night, just finished the intro, and I'm already going, oh, is this a terrible idea? Just because my reading for fiction would be before bed, and when I get into bed, it's like I got about 3 to 4 pages in me, and then I'm asleep. So I'm wondering if it's the right move. I'll let you know.
Okay, so my next book, I decided, is actually because of a news story that I saw. I was like, you know what? I just made me think of this book. So get this. NASA just recently, I think this is yesterday for us when we're recording it. It'll probably be a week ago when this goes live. But NASA found that one of their space rovers, this one's called the Ingenuity. Do you know about the Ingenuity? My wife's really big into the space rovers, and so she's constantly following all that stuff. But Ingenuity somehow picked up a piece of fabric on its leg, and it currently looks like a piece of toilet paper is trailing it everywhere it goes, which is just really interesting. So you can actually see a picture of the Mars rover, and it has like this little piece of toilet paper hanging off of it, but it's just a piece of fabric from the spaceship. Just kind of a weird thing. But all in all, that made me think, you know what? I've heard that The Martian is a great book, and I kind of want to read it.
The movie was outstanding.
The movie was good, and so I'm kind of like, hey, maybe I should read the book The Martian, all because of the Mars rover having a piece of toilet paper or fabric of some kind hanging.
Whatever gets you to read, man.
Well, I wonder if maybe there actually is a person up there or a Martian that just left his toilet paper and it got caught, and now we know.
I mean, you heard it here first. Pastor Targe of the Moody Church endorses all sorts of extraterrestrial things going on.
I mean, can you believe that that's how we found out?
It's been so nice working with you.
Like, if we found out, there's life on other planets, how do we know? Yeah. Because there's some toilet paper someone left. All the people on that planet that were hiding, they're like, dang, they found us because it touched. No. I doubt that that's very much the case. But I'm excited because we're actually going to get quite a few more book recommendations and some deeper conversation on this with our guest today, Dr. Karen Swallow Prior. And so why do you say let's go over to the interview? Well, hey, everyone. We are talking now to Dr. Karen Swallow Prior. She is the research professor of English and Christianity and Culture at Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary. She's written a whole bunch of books, amazing books. I highly recommend them. She's got a podcast called Jane and Jesus. And can I just say, she is a phenomenal social media follow. I highly recommend following her on social media. Her insights on so many things are just amazing. But Dr. Prior, welcome to the intersection.
It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. I'm so glad to talk to you. I said to you before, I'm geeking out about this because I've been following you for quite some time and just so appreciate your writing and speaking. But what I wanted to kind of center our conversation on today was the topic of fiction, which is what mostly you write about. And I'm curious, why do you think it's important for Christians to read fiction?
We'll start right with the important question. Yeah. So let me start by saying, when we think about fiction, we might think about different things. So I primarily write about and care about and talk about literary fiction. And now the other kinds of fiction are fine, but I think, there is a difference between fiction that is just written for commercial purposes, for entertainment. It's just a story, nothing wrong with that. But when we're talking about literary fiction, we're actually talking about a form of art that uses words to recreate some sort of human experience. And so art that uses language, in a literary artistic way is something that just speaks to us, forms us, trains us, gives us insights in something that is part of what it means to be human, because we are, as being made in God's image, there's something about the nature of language itself, about words and the God who is the word, that is revealed when we encounter literature that is using words in an artful way. So a lot of times people, especially in the church, when they think about fiction, they're thinking like Harlequin romances or some history novel, which there's nothing wrong with those things. And I think reading reading any good stories can do a lot of the same things that literary fiction does. But actually research has shown that literary fiction, one of the distinctions that it has is that it requires us, because it does so much showing rather than telling, so much recreating through words rather than just, informing us, that it actually cultivates in us empathy and wider perspective, because it requires us to make predictions and to enter into the experience of another and to judge that experience at the same time, or that perspective at the same time we're entering into it. So it's a really kind of complicated thing that words used in this artful way requires of us and then cultivates in us.
Okay, so the label and category of literary fiction, I think, is probably new to a lot of people who are thinking, because they're like, okay, what separates James Patterson novels from like John Steinbeck novels, that separates it from like a really good comic novel, like the Spider-Man series or something like that. So what would you call those other things? Would James Patterson be more of a like non-literary fiction, or?
Yeah, this is a really good question. I didn't know we were going to get right into the weeds so quickly, but I hope
this is
interesting. I hope this is interesting to you and to listeners.
It's interesting to me, but I think it's helpful to figure out like what exactly are we talking about that Christians should read.
I think that these are really good questions. So let me first say that, of course, the categories are never like entirely black and white. There's no like fine, bright line between literary and non-literary. But the categories we would generally use are literary fiction and commercial fiction. So commercial fiction is designed to be entertaining. It's going to tell a good story. And good stories are fantastic. But literary fiction is not only telling a story, but it's really using words in a deliberate way, almost the way that a good poet would use words, like trying to recreate an experience through narrative, rather than poetry, but still using those words in such a way that they are doing more than just relaying a series of events, if that makes sense. And one good test of the difference between literary fiction and commercial fiction is whether or not it holds up to rereading. Because of a story, and I, just to be completely honest, like I listen to suspense novels sometimes when I go running, right? And suspense novel, even the best written ones, they're not something I'm going to ever listen to or read again, because once I know what happens, that's the whole point. But literary fiction uses language so well that every rereading allows you to see something different, notice something different, experience something different that you didn't before. Kind of like the Bible, but
Yeah. So I think maybe I'm a little confused on this, because when I hear literary fiction, I hear how you're describing it. Like I think I realize I think of one book, for example, a classic book that I just couldn't stand. Right. And so I'm just going to put it out there. There's two actually that I really don't like. One is Mystery of Edwin Drood. I'm never going to read again. I read it through, didn't love it. And then there's Hunchback of Notre Dame by Victor Hugo. I loved his other work, love Les Miserables, but I did not enjoy those. Does my simple just not liking a book not make it literary fiction? Or because then there's confusing, like, is it objective?
Right. So this bigger question about objectivity versus subjectivity is so important. I mean, not only when we're talking about literature, but when we're talking about all of art and really all of life. So one really simple way of kind of thinking about it, which doesn't necessarily answer all the questions, but it's a way to begin answering the question, is to think about the difference between these two statements. I like it and it is good. So I like it is really completely subjective. And we can, as human beings, we can like things that are good, and we can like things that are bad, and we can like things that are in between, that are mediocre. I can like to listen to cheesy 80s music loud in my car and know that it's, and know that it's not like the greatest music, although some of it's pretty good. But then recognizing the difference between what I like and what is that there is a category of objective goodness and truth and beauty that I may not always recognize or appreciate, or might not have the skills to understand and like. And so, so the world is filled with the things that we like, and things that are good that we haven't learned to like or don't know to like. And that's sort of for me, that's a process. We're allowed to, there's a lot of room in between, but I think just recognizing the difference between our personal preference and likes versus sort of objective goodness, truth, and beauty that we'll never really completely grasp, but or appreciate as much as we should, but we can grow toward and understand exists, even if we aren't ready for it.
Now, I know you personally love Jane Austen.
Yes.
Like that's I believe your podcast, Jane and Jesus, is about Jane Austen and Jesus. And at Moody Church, I think we've been, especially over the last couple of years, getting regular illustrations from Jane Austen books. Our pastor loves Jane Austen. Why is it that you have that love for Jane?
So, true confession, I first read Pride and Prejudice in high school and hated it. I had no clue what was going on.
You're giving me hope for
Yes, I didn't understand what was happening. I didn't know that it was a satirical book. I thought it was just boring. Because I wasn't, either my teacher didn't help me, or my mind wasn't sophisticated enough to grasp the subtlety of Austen's humor and her satire. So just understanding that the book is satire, that she's gently criticizing her world and the characters in her world, and so that, like, the famous opening sentence that is a truth universally acknowledged, that a single man with a fortune must be in want of a wife, that's actually supposed to be funny, because it's actually just represents poor Elizabeth Bennet's mother's view, and we're not even supposed to really scorn or mock her mother, because her mother's concerns for her getting her daughters married are a reflection of the reality of their world, that these girls are vulnerable in this world without having this kind of a good and protective and marriage that will support them well.
Yeah.
So there's just so much going on that once you understand that Austen is satirical, she's criticizing her society, and criticizing male and female relationships and romance and courtship and family relationships. It's just really hilarious.
Yeah, but you think that Christians should read Jane Austen?
Jane Austen, a lot of people don't know, Jane Austen was a devout Christian. She was an Anglican. She actually, again, full disclosure, she wrote in a letter that she didn't like the evangelicals. So, yeah. I mean, she was high church Anglican, right? And the evangelicals
was also Anglican.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, right. I know. Right, I don't know why all the evangelicals like Lewis and they don't like Austen, but that's another show. Yeah.
We'll schedule that for another time.
Right. So Austen was a Christian. Her Christian worldview is just so integrated into her thinking and understanding that it's just assumed. It's not like she preaches about it or puts it on the surface. It's just part of her understanding. There's a myth out there that all of her clergymen in her novels are bad clergymen, that she always mocks them, but that's actually not true. There's one most famous character that is a bad clergyman, but she's upholding like the true and high holy purpose of clergymen by criticizing the ones for whom, which was most of them then, it's just a career. It's just like a political post. So we learn a lot about the church and about church history and different kinds of Christianity when we read someone like Jane Austen, whom Alistair MacIntyre calls in his book After Virtue like the last modern the last moral philosopher of modern literature or something like that. I mean, she is a moral philosopher.
Yeah.
And a Christian one.
Yeah. If someone's going to read Austen, like where would you say start here? Like what would you say is the good entry point, and how should they read it? We start with the entry point.
Right. I mean, I really do think Pride and Prejudice is a great entry point. It is not, if you've watched the films and that's all you know, then it's probably somewhat ruined for you. And so, I mean, I should also commend Sense and Sensibility, because I wrote and edited my own edition of it. And in the introduction, I explain what Austen is doing. Sense and Sensibility is probably her funniest novel, but it's also one of her earliest ones. So it's a little bit rougher, I think, in terms of its artistic development. And then her most evangelical novel, the one where she's really most sympathetic to the concerns of evangelicals, is Mansfield Park, and it's less satirical and less humorous. So I would say that might be another good one as well.
Okay, let's talk about Pride and Prejudice real quick, because you have a book right here that you wrote that I love, and I want to encourage people to check it out. It's called On Reading Well, and in it you have this opening illustration that I really liked of a bicycle, and like knowing how a bicycle could be used. I'm not sure if you can explain that better, or I can just read it for you. But
why don't you read it and then I'll comment as necessary.
Okay, you said without knowing what the purpose of a bicycle is, we cannot determine its excellence. Similarly, we can hardly attain human excellence if we don't have an understanding of human purpose. And you relate that to just the understanding of like how we read books, and we need to know how a book is meant to be read so that it can shape our virtues. And I'm curious, when it comes to Pride and Prejudice, you said first time you read it, you didn't like it. Is there some like general advice you give for maybe even virtues that people should be looking for? Like it's helpful to know that it's sarcastic, that it's not meant to be taken at face value. But like, are there any other things that you'd say, hey, you should know this if you're going to dive into Jane Austen after listening to this podcast?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I would say about Jane Austen's novels is true of any novel. I mean, or any work of literature. Like genre actually really matters. Like, actually, if I can broaden it out a little bit to more everyday experience, we've lost so much of a sense of what genre is that it actually does impede our ability to read and understand. So, for example, many people don't know, or too many people don't know the difference between an opinion piece in a newspaper or an op-ed and a news article, right? So like if we don't know the difference and we read what is supposed to be an opinion piece and it's supposed to be subjective, not objective, right? Then we can be offended because we think, oh, this newspaper is not reporting the news, it's reporting opinion. But an op-ed is by definition an opinion piece, whereas a news piece is supposed to be more objective. So like, and the internet has made this harder because it used to be when you read an actual print newspaper, it'll, there's a section that's op-ed and a section that's letters to the editor, right? And a section that's news. And on the internet, everything's sort of disconnected and disembodied and floating out there. And so we don't always know what something is. And so even with literature, like if we know something is satire, or we know it's a novel, or we know it's a short story, or we know it's an epic, or we know it's a poem, we're going to read it differently in some respect, in the same way that as in the opening example that you just read, like if we know something is supposed to be a bicycle and what it's supposed to do, we judge it differently from like a unicycle. And this is all in the context of the larger subject of the book, which is virtue. And we only can judge the virtue of something or of ourselves if we understand the purpose. And so even in understanding what the purpose of understanding that Jane Austen was trying to gently correct her society through satire helps us to understand how to read it.
So outside of Jane Austen, if you were to recommend, let's say 3 books, I know that's going to be so hard. It's so, I always feel like it's mean when someone asks me if you could choose one book on an island. I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, my Kindle, I guess, right?
Right.
Let's take them all. But if you could tell Christians like, hey, here are 3 books that you should read, that you should just have, and these are this is one key thing you should look for in each of them, what would those be? I'm sorry, I know that's putting you on the spot. I should have given you time to prep for that.
No. Oh no, it's fine. So probably the top book that I would recommend is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte.
Okay.
Now a lot of people, they're, again, if you've not read it, you just think, oh, it's about a woman, it's a love story, and it's blah blah blah, and it is about a woman, and there is a love story, but it's so much more than that. Jane Eyre is actually first of all, it looks long, but it is written in such a relatable, authentic voice that it's a fast read, in the sense that this just seems like someone who's talking to you because of the way that it's written. But it's actually almost an allegory of the modern Christian living in a nominally Christian world, trying to be faithful in a world where there are so many false versions of Christianity. That's what the novel is about.
Oh, wow. Okay, you sold me on that one.
Okay,
Jane Eyre. Yeah, okay, now I'm adding that to my reading list.
Absolutely.
Okay, number 2.
All right, so number 2, so that's sort of my universal one. The next ones are going to be just like my personal taste and background. So
that's okay. Go for it.
Okay. So these are the books that I love. So I'm going to say Great Expectations by Charles Dickens.
Okay.
So we give Dickens another chance. Don't start with The Mystery of Edwin Drood.
I love other Dickens, and I love Great Expectations. It's
good.
Just Drood was not for me.
Good. And then let's see.
So wait, hold on. What should someone be looking for in Great Expectations?
Oh, in Great Expectations, they should be looking for the way in which our expectations can be based in falsehood and wrong values and wrong loves and wrong desires, and how far that can lead us astray, so that we actually miss what's good that's right in front of us. Yeah.
Okay, number 3.
All right. So and you want fiction, right?
Fiction. Let's stay with fiction.
Okay. Because then I'm gonna put a bonus one that's not fiction. Okay.
I love bonus.
So, oh goodness, this is so hard. I have very narrow tastes, so that's why it's hard, because I know other people have different tastes. So one other one, I'm going to say. So this is really hard. I'm going to say George Orwell's 1984.
Okay.
And I think it's a dark read. It's pretty gritty. But I think it has a lot to teach us about language, which we've been talking about. And how our thoughts are dependent upon the words that we have available to us.
Yeah.
And so related to that, my bonus one, I'll just go right to that because it's connected. The book I think every Christian should read, period, is Neil Postman's Amusing Ourselves to Death.
Okay.
which in the preface he talks about, I mean, it was published in like 1985, and he was talking about the subtitle has to do with the age of show business, but everything that he says about television is magnified even more for all digital media and social media. Yeah. And he talks in the very beginning about, I think in the introduction or the prologue or something, about the vision cast by Orwell in 1984 for totalitarianism versus the vision cast by Aldous Huxley in Brave New World of being sort of consumed by our own desires and comforts and pleasures. And Postman famously says that he thinks that Huxley's vision won, and that we're just sort of surrendering ourselves to our own pleasures and desires. We don't need a totalitarian government. But anyway, I think 1984 is the superior novel of those two books. So
very interesting. Okay, so since we're going nonfiction for a second, I've got a question. I'm not sure if you've read it, but recently I just finished Nicholas Carr's The Shallows.
Yeah.
Which, and one of the things that he brings out that I just find really interesting is that he mentions that Socrates was basically almost anti-book, which surprised me. Like, I knew that he hadn't written anything, Plato wrote it for him, but I didn't know that he believed that books and the written word would actually, he thought it would lessen people's ability to memorize and internalize truth, right? He thought it would make them more weak-minded. And I feel like now some may have a tendency to look at people who prefer like watching TV or movies to books, like they don't like reading. Like we tend to look at them as the weak-minded. I'm not calling anyone weak-minded. I'm saying that tends to be the tendency. But like, do you think something's foundationally different here, or should it not be such a big deal when someone says they don't want to read, they don't like to read, they prefer to watch a movie? And I'm saying this.
Yeah. You're right. No, so yeah, I'll back up, and I have read the Shallows. It's really important. It's kind of a newer sort of Nicholas Carr does what Postman was doing with more science behind him about digital media, and it's a similar picture. So it's a more up-to-date view. And when this whole concern that Plato and Socrates had about writing and keeping, rather than just memorizing, it is really profound and powerful, and it actually helps temper my tendency to do what you just said, which is to kind of, think of reading and literacy as the be all and end all of human civilization. Now, I do think for Christians, there's a particular calling that we have to be people of the word and to cultivate literacy. But it's important to remember, like when I want to get down on social media and digital media, to think, okay, so I'm doing the same thing that Plato did in being nervous about writing. So there are differences in what they are. And I mean, we all know, I mean, well, not all of us. I'm old enough to remember how I had everyone's phone numbers memorized.
Oh yeah.
Right.
As a kid, now I had everyone.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah. Now I don't have. I could barely remember my own because of the cell phone. So what, it's definitely true that we lose some memory, and when we lose memory of things, it's filled with it's just different. I don't know that it's, I don't want to give up my cell phone, but another book maybe that would be helpful in this conversation and for people to think about is Marshall McLuhan's Understanding Media. In that book, he talks about how when we get new technologies, and writing is a technology, a pen is a technology. So he's talking about, in the very broadest sense, we tend to just focus on what we gain from it, but we don't think enough about what we lose from it. And so he's not anti-technology. He's just calling for us to be mindful of what we are losing when we get a technology, not just so enamored with what we gain that we don't realize that we are losing something.
Very good. Okay. Do you have time for one more question?
Yeah.
Okay. Here's what I want to know. Is there anyone right now that you look at in the literary world that you'd say they're writing right now, we should read what they're writing right now, because they're going to be what we look back on and say is literary fiction? Because I know, like, in literary fiction, the way you describe it, it almost has like a classical sense to it. Like,
Right.
It's stood the test of time. Is there anyone that you think,
like
you're reading right now, they're like, hey, start looking at what they're writing?
So because my specialty is 18th and 19th century British literature, I'm not an expert on the contemporary stuff, but I will say that I think a really important current living writer who may not be to everyone's taste, because he does deal with sort of the dark and the violent at times, but he uses language to help us really experience what someone else is experiencing, and that's George Saunders. And I do write about one of his short stories in on Reading Well.
Yeah.
And so he's going to go down in the history books as an important writer from the 20th and 21st centuries.
One book you'd say Saunders start off with?
I would say his collection of short stories called 10th of December.
10th of December. Okay.
Right. But again, I just it's would not be to everyone's taste. It's but it's yeah.
That's fair. Well, Dr. Pryor, thank you so much for spending time with us today and talking to us about fiction. It's been such a blessing learning from you. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure that all those who are listening are learning as well. So thank you for that.
Thank you for having me.